deep within him, like a drumbeat from the bowels of the earth. It reverberated through my chest, making my bones ache. He didn't move closer, but he didn't need to. The sheer presence of him rooted me to the spot. "Tommy," he growled, the sound drawn out like a predator savoring the hunt. "You've walked into the heart of it. The Mournes don't forget. The blood spilled, the lives taken, they're all offerings. Offerings to us." I tightened my grip on the pistol, the weight of it suddenly feeling inadequate. What good was a gun against something like this? Against him? "Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice trembled with the effort to keep steady. "What do you want from me?" The figure tilted its head, and the motion was unnatural, like a marionette with its strings jerked too hard. His lips twisted into what could have been a smile, though it bared too many teeth that were jagged and wrong, like broken shards of glass. "We are the Mournes," he said simply, gesturing to the mist, the stones, and the shadowy figures slipping between the trees. "We are what came before. And you, Tommy McGrath, you're what comes after. You've carried our will in your veins, through your violence, through your hatred. You're ours now." "No," I took a step back, my voice louder, defiant. "I'm no one's. I've fought for my people, for freedom." "Freedom?" The figure laughed, and the sound was sharp, like a blade scraping stone. The shadows around him seemed to swell and shift. "You think your war is your own? You think the blood you've spilled hasn't fed us, hasn't strengthened us? Every bullet, every scream, it all belongs to us. And you, Tommy, you've been the most loyal servant of all." "No!" I shouted, raising the gun, though my hand trembled violently. "You're lying. I don't serve anyone." The figure stepped closer, his form towering over me, the darkness around him stretching out like claws. "Then why are you here? Why do the mountains call your name? Why do the stones recognize you?" I couldn't answer. My mind raced, desperate for an explanation, a way out. The pistol in my hand felt like a child's toy, useless against the sheer weight of the presence before me. "Run," the voice whispered in my mind, though it wasn't mine. It was faint, almost drowned out by the figure's guttural speech. "Run, and don't look back." But my legs refused to move. The figure raised a pale, clawed hand, pointing to the circle of stones. The markings on them glowed brighter now, pulsating in time with the racing beat of my heart. The earth beneath me trembled, a low rumble like the growl of some ancient, waking beast. "You've already given so much," the figure intoned, his voice a chant that seemed to echo from every direction. "But now, the Mournes demand everything. Your body. Your soul." "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Yes," he hissed, stepping into the circle. "And there's no escape." Then, as his hand reached toward me, I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot rang out, deafening in the silence of the mountains. The figure recoiled, but not as a man would when hit by a bullet. His body rippled, like smoke disturbed by a gust of wind. The shadows around him twisted violently, and the mist thickened, swirling like a storm. "You can't kill what isn't alive," he roared, his voice thundering over the mountains. The ground cracked beneath the stones, and a deep, green light spilled forth, bathing the clearing in an otherworldly glow. I turned and ran. This time, my legs obeyed. I sprinted through the trees, the mist clawing at my face, the shadows closing in. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The voice of the figure followed me, a howl of rage and laughter that echoed in my mind. "Run, Tommy McGrath. Run as far as you like. The Mournes will always find you." I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. I stumbled and fell more than once, my hands scraping against jagged rocks, my lungs burning with the effort. But eventually, the mist began to thin, and the shadows fell away. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting the mountains in a pale, gray light. When I finally reached my car, I collapsed against it, gasping for breath. My hands were trembling, bloodied and bruised, but I didn't care. I climbed in, started the engine, and sped away without looking back. I've never returned to the Mournes. I've never spoken of what happened that night. Not to Callahan, not to anyone. But the figure's voice still haunts me, whispering in the back of my mind. The Mournes don't forget. And neither do I. The voice came from everywhere at once. From the shadows, from the mist, from the rocks beneath my feet. I tried to step back, but the world seemed to shrink around me, the trees closing in like prison bars. My hand clutched the pistol at my side, but I knew it was useless. Whatever this was, bullets wouldn't stop it. The figure in front of me tilted its head, its black, bottomless eyes fixed on mine. "You were warned," it said, the words like the rumble of distant thunder. "And yet you returned." "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just here to do a job. That's all." The thing laughed, a sound that made my stomach twist. "A job," it repeated, mocking. "Always a job, always an excuse. Do you even know what you've been part of, Tommy McGrath?" The way it said my name sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. The figure stepped closer, and I could see its face more clearly now. It wasn't just pale, it was wrong. The skin was stretched too tightly over the skull, the features angular and sharp in ways that didn't seem natural. Its mouth curled into a smile, revealing teeth that were jagged and uneven, like broken glass. "The blood you've spilled," it said, "the lives you've taken. You thought it was for your cause, your people. But it was never about that. You were feeding it. Feeding us." "Feeding what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What are you?" The figure raised a hand, long fingers pointing toward the stone circle. "This land is old," it said. "Older than your wars, older than your people. It has always hungered. And your violence, your hatred, your bloodshed, it has been a feast." I shook my head, backing away. "No. That's not true. That's not what this is about." The thing laughed again, a low, guttural sound that seemed to shake the ground. "Believe what you want," it said. "But the truth remains. You are part of this now. You cannot escape it." I felt the weight of its words pressing down on me, suffocating. My mind raced, searching for a way out, a way to wake up from this nightmare. But there was no escape. The fog was too thick, the trees too close, the stones glowing faintly with that unnatural green light. The figure stepped back into the mist, its body dissolving into shadows. "You have a choice," it said, its voice echoing in the darkness. "Stay, and become part of the land, a servant to its hunger. Or leave, and carry the curse with you. Either way, you are marked." "I'm not staying here," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm leaving. I'll never come back." "You think it's that simple?" the voice asked, a cruel edge to its tone. "You cannot outrun what you've done. The mountains will call you back, in time. They always do." I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the uneven ground. The mist seemed to cling to me, pulling at my clothes, but I forced myself to keep moving. The voice followed me, echoing through the night. "Run, Tommy McGrath," it said. "But you'll never be free." I don't know how long I ran. Minutes, hours, it all blurred together. By the time I stumbled back to my car, my body was shaking, my lungs burning with every breath. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door, locking it as if that would keep the darkness out. The engine roared to life, and I sped down the mountain road, the headlights cutting through the mist. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just drove, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I finally reached the outskirts of Belfast, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The city looked the same as always, its streets quiet and empty in the early morning. But I felt different. Changed. Marked, as the figure had said. I didn't go back to the barracks. I didn't report to Callahan. I just kept driving, aimlessly, until I found myself at the edge of the sea. I sat there for hours, staring out at the water, trying to make sense of what had happened. But there was no sense to it. No explanation that could make it right. The mountains of Mourne had taken something from me that night, something I could never get back. And deep down, I knew they weren't finished with me yet. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and restless wandering. I couldn't go back to Belfast, not to the barracks, not to Callahan. The thought of facing them, of trying to explain what had happened, was unbearable. Instead, I drifted from town to town, a ghost in a world that no longer felt real. The voice echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the choice I had been given. Stay and serve, or leave and carry the curse. Neither option seemed survivable. The weight of it pressed down on me, a leaden ache in my chest that refused to ease. It wasn't long before I started noticing the signs. At first, they were small things, a fleeting shadow in the corner of my eye, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Then it got worse. The dreams began, vivid and suffocating. In them, I was back in the mountains, the mist thick and cloying, the stones glowing with that sickly green light. The figure was always there, watching, waiting. You cannot escape, it would say, its voice dripping with malice. The mountains will always find you. When I woke, the air would feel heavy, the room colder than it should have been. Sometimes, I swore I could still hear the echoes of its laughter, even in the daylight. I tried to ignore it, to drown it out with whiskey and noise, but nothing worked. The curse, if that's what it was, clung to me like a second skin, inescapable and unrelenting. Every attempt to push it away only seemed to draw it closer, until I was left questioning whether I had ever truly left the mountains at all. One night, as I sat alone in a dingy pub on the outskirts of Derry, nursing my third glass of cheap whiskey, a man approached me. He was old, his face weathered and lined, his eyes sharp with a kind of knowing that made my stomach churn. "You've seen them, haven't you?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Seen what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Don't play coy, lad. The shadows, the stones, the hunger. The Mournes don't let their secrets go lightly." "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. He slid into the seat across from me, ignoring the hostility in my tone. "Call me Connell," he said. "And you've got the look of a man marked by them. The mountains have their claws in you, don't they?" I didn't answer, but my silence must have been enough. Connell nodded, his expression grim. I thought so," he said. "You're not the first, you know. And you won't be the last. What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice low. "Nothing," Connell said. "I'm here to help. Or at least, to tell you the truth of it." I leaned back in my seat, skeptical. "The truth?" He nodded again. "The stones, the shadows, the voice you heard, they're part of something older than you can imagine. Older than Ireland itself. The mountains, they're alive, in a way. They feed on blood, on violence, on the darkest parts of human nature. And once they've marked you, there's no escaping them." "That's not possible," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Connell's gaze was steady. "Believe what you want, lad. But you felt it, haven't you? The pull, the weight of it. They'll call you back, sooner or later. And when they do, you'll have to choose. Choose what? I demanded. How you'll serve, Conall said simply. Because serve you will, one way or another. The mountains don't give without taking. And they've taken a liking to you. I stared at him, my mind racing. And what about you? I asked. How do you know all this? His expression darkened. Because I was you, once, he said. Years ago. I made my choice, and I've been running ever since. But you can't run forever. They'll find you. They always do. Before I could say anything else, Conall stood, tossing a few coins onto the table. Good luck, lad, he said. You're going to need it. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with his words and the crushing weight of inevitability. The weeks turned into months, and though I tried to push Conall's words from my mind, they lingered like a shadow, always just at the edge of my thoughts. The dreams grew worse, more vivid. In them, I was always in the mountains, surrounded by mist, the stones glowing brighter, their hum resonating deep in my bones. The voice was there too, mocking, taunting, calling me back. I began to feel the pull Conall had spoken of. It was subtle at first, a fleeting thought, a whisper in the back of my mind. But as time passed, it grew stronger, more insistent. No matter how far I ran, no matter how much I tried to drown it out, the call of the mountains was always there, relentless and inescapable. One night, I found myself standing at the edge of a dark forest, the road winding up into the hills. I didn't remember driving there, didn't remember getting out of the car. But there I was, staring up at the shadowy outline of the Mournes, my heart pounding in my chest. They've called you back, a voice said, and I turned to see Conall standing behind me. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, as if the life had been drained from him. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled faintly, a sad, weary smile. I told you, lad. You can't run forever. They've got me too. It's time to go back. No, I said, shaking my head. I won't go. I can't. Conall's expression hardened. You don't have a choice. None of us do. The mountains won't let you go until they've had their due. I turned back to the road, the pull stronger now, like an invisible hand dragging me forward. My legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the darkness. Conall followed, his footsteps heavy on the gravel. As we climbed higher, the mist thickened, wrapping around us like a shroud. The air grew colder, the hum of the stones louder with every step. When we reached the circle, it was just as I remembered it, the ancient stones glowing with that sickly green light, the air heavy with an otherworldly presence. The figure was waiting for us, its black eyes gleaming in the darkness. Welcome back, it said, its voice echoing in my mind. Conall stepped forward, his head bowed. We're here, he said. Do what you must. The figure tilted its head, its gaze shifting to me. And you, Tommy McGrath? Have you accepted your fate? I wanted to scream, to run, to fight. But I knew it was pointless. The mountains had claimed me, just as they had claimed Conall and countless others before him. There was no escape. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice shaking. Your service, the figure said. Your life, your soul. The mountains demand it. I looked at Conall, his face etched with resignation. Is there no other way? I asked. He shook his head. This is the price we pay. The price for the blood we've spilled, for the violence we've sown. The mountains take what they're owed. The figure extended a hand, its long, claw-like fingers reaching for me. Choose, it said. Stay and serve, or resist and be consumed. Either way, you belong to the mountains now. I closed my eyes, the weight of my choices crushing me. I thought of the lives I'd taken, the blood I'd spilled, the pain I'd caused. Conall was right. This was the price, and there was no escaping it. When I opened my eyes, I stepped forward, into the circle. The stones pulsed with light, the hum rising to a deafening roar. The figure smiled, its teeth gleaming like shards of glass. "Good," it said. "You've made the right choice." As the light engulfed me, I felt the mountains close around me, their hunger sated for now. I was theirs, bound to their will, a servant to their ancient, insatiable hunger. And deep down, I knew I would never leave the Mournes again. The world faded to black, the voice echoing in my mind one last time. "Welcome home."